So what's your story? Really, what's your real story? I mean, what's the story of your life, all of the different situations, all of the different experiences of your life? Let me make that even more clear. What's your zip code story? The story that affects where you came from, who you are, and maybe even how you are. Let's talk about that today on the What's My Story podcast. Let's
What's my story? How'd I get here? Yeah. What is my story? Motivate.
Hey y'all, what's happening? Welcome back to another What's My Story podcast, the show where we share how we got from there to here, how our guests have navigated pivotal moments in their lives to the success that they enjoy today. I'm your boy, your man, your uncle, your friend, somebody. I'm the dude that's happens to be right in front of you right now. Robert Kennedy III, RK3, that's me. And I just am glad that you are here for another session with us. We're going to have a fantastic guest. But before we get to the guest for today, I just want to remind you about a couple of things. If you need a little bit of motivation, inspiration, and elevation every Monday morning before you get into the week, make sure that you join me on the Monday morning Get Up show. Bam, it's right here somewhere. And we do that at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, Eastern Daylight Time, whatever time it is on the eastern coast of the United States of America. That's the time that we do it at 8 a.m. every Monday morning. Join us for a little bit of Get Up and Go. Sharing with you one other thing. Earlier this year, we did what is called the Story to Stage Summit, and we had some phenomenal presenters. Presenters sharing ideas and topics that talked about how to attract your ideal audience, how to create more visibility, and ultimately generate more income through the one thing that's unique to you, and that's your story. So we wanted to bring to you a session or a workshop or a day that was really going to help you grow in your business. And so we've put all of that stuff together. We've got replays. We have this content that if you watch it, I guarantee you it's going to be valuable to you. We had Kirk Nugent, Delatoro McNeil, Tom Schwab, Kat Dunn, Diana Gladney. We had a lot of phenomenal presenters. So do yourself a favor, do me a favor, head on down here to storyskills.club/summit, storyskills.club/summit, so that you can grab the replays from the Story to Stage Summit. And lastly, I want you to listen to the audio version of not only this podcast, but other versions or other episodes of this podcast. And you can do that by going to What's My Story Podcast.live. What's My Story Podcast.live. So let's jump on in. We've got a fantastic guest with a fantastic story today. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine, I went to a book launch a few weeks ago, and what's your zip code story? Understanding and overcoming class bias in the workplace. Wow. Let's talk about that. My guest, Christopher C.J. Gross, is a TEDx speaker, the founder of Ascension Worldwide, which is a diversity, equity, and inclusivity training and consulting firm based in Washington, D.C. He's been featured in the Washington Post, the Baltimore Examiner, the Tom Joyner Show, the Audrey Chapman Show. He's been on Fox, NBC, CBS, and more. And again, he's the author of What's Your Zip Code Story? Let's have a conversation with my friend, Christopher C.J. Gross. Hey, what's happening? CJ, welcome to the show, brother. Glad you're here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here, RK3. What's going on, my brother?
hanging out, man. What's the most exciting thing that's happening in your world right now? I know you got this book, and so that's probably pretty big. But what else is exciting for you in your world right now?
Well, what else? I mean, that's a big concept, but just the other week, we pitched that concept of the book to a producer who is
That was me. My daughter's calling.
Make sure she doesn't need anything. She might be stuck at school or something. You never know.
Well,
When the kids
no. I mean, well, her mommy's here today too, so
okay, there you
she'll
go.
make
There
it.
you
She'll
go.
make
Yeah,
it.
okay. We pitched the book concept to a documentary producer last week, and we think that that's going to move forward. So that
Yeah.
is very exciting that the book will move into the documentary format.
Yeah.
So like that just blows my mind. And next week we're traveling to San Diego, so I'm excited about that, just to get out of what's about to be a cold space in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, how are you doing with the being the author, being the speaker? I know that those are two different spaces in some ways, and we kind of try to encourage people to do both. But there are a lot of speakers that are not necessarily authors. Tell us a little bit about what made you decide that you wanted to jump into that author space as well.
So this is my fourth book. The other three books I wrote were self-published.
Yeah.
In this particular book, those other books I felt empowered, and I felt that those books needed to be written. This book needed to be written, but it took a little bit more encouragement to actually produce it. I did not wake up and
Yeah.
think to myself, I want to write another book. That is absolutely not what happened. I just went through several experiences, and I went through a conversation with myself. Actually, I applied to speak at SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management Inclusion Conference in 2019,
Mhm.
and I had that oh my gosh, I got chosen, and now I actually have to speak. And I had right, that feeling. It was like, oh snap, I
Yeah.
want to do this, but I actually don't have to do this. So I was I had prepared the speech and everything, and at the last minute, I had heard some amazing stories
Yeah.
about different people's zip code stories, and that led to me changing the concept of the talk at the very last minute.
Wow.
And it was one of those conferences where I was speaking on the very last day and the very last hour. I was like, no one's going to show up. But to my surprise, not only did 60 people show up, 60 people stayed. And when
Right.
60 people stayed, they literally had to pull the plug for the lights and the audio to get people out of the room. People started crying. And the reason why, I wish I could say it was because I was such a great speaker and I was touching people's hearts, but it was really about their zip code story being lifted up.
Mhm.
And just by that experience, I was inspired, and I knew that this book needed to be written.
Yeah.
Um, that started the process, and everything else. You know how that goes. You got to actually do the
Yeah.
writing and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's back up just a little bit. So you've got this book, and you've been able to share and hear some fantastic stories about people's origins, about their zip codes, about where they grew up, what framed who they are. But let's talk a little bit about some of your framing for a moment. You told us a story about your daughter
Yeah.
being in the hospital and how that really framed what you do now. So you also told us you were a single dad
Yeah.
for quite a bit of time. So tell us a
9 years.
little bit about um, what it was like for you. What was the biggest challenge in being a single dad for nearly a decade, man?
I think the biggest challenge. I had a friend who's a life coach, and we would just chat and talk about challenges. And she said, "You know what your problem is? It's not any of
Oh,
these things or your goals or not accomplishing them, sleep or any of the challenges, resources." She said, "You don't seem to realize that you are a single dad trying to do it all, trying to be a business owner, writing
mm,
writing books. I was writing a book at that time as well. I was in school, and I had a job. I just did not come to grips with reality that that was my situation. And that was a good and bad thing. It was good in the way that it allowed me to not stop when I saw obstacles, because I was like, I am this person, I'm making it happen. The challenging part was it created more frustration because I didn't allow myself to acknowledge all of the things that I was going through, all of the emotional things, all of the stressful things and all of the technical things. And then just being a dad, showing up
yeah,
at all of the events, because that's like, okay, if I'm going to do this business, I want to show up at all of the events. I want to be the best dad. I want to do, I recorded my daughters one day. I was like, what are your goals? What are the things you want to do? I want to personally develop them to a greater place in life.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, that was challenging because I didn't realize all of that was really happening. I was almost like not, you know, my reality was not the reality at the time, which again was good and bad. So that was
Yeah.
probably the biggest challenge.
So inevitably, as we grow our children, there are these moments. I mean, you heard my daughter just calling trying to FaceTime me, and we all
Mhm.
have these moments, dad moments, especially when some stuff happens, right? And in your case, you had a something with your daughter at 16 that
Mhm.
allowed her to be in the hospital, and you had to make this decision at that time. Take us through the moment where you realize that your daughter needs you, but you also have a career altering decision possibly to make.
Yeah, it was like crash, an intersectionality of everything just happened all at the same moment, at the same
Yeah.
time. I was in the process of leaving a job, being a single parent,
Yep.
leaving a job that had great benefits in health insurance.
Yeah.
But I had some things set up. But one of my daughters, who's just the quintessential ideal student, never got into a fight in school, really needed things to be ideally kind of set up so that she can operate. She's a rule follower, never had to tell her to make her bed. I want to make my bed, all those things. And she goes to a summer camp over like a week in Pennsylvania, and she comes back and she's just not quite the same.
Right.
But I don't really gather what's going on with her. And at the same time, I've already put in my 2 weeks notice at my job, which everything is going to shift from. And I'm going to this another job or opportunity contract where I'm not going to have insurance. I got to pay for it myself. I'm not going to have the security of a job. Um, and I'm like, okay, my everything I've done up until this point has prepared me. This is what I was thinking in my head, right? Everything I've done up to this point has prepared me for this.
Yeah.
I can deal with this. And my daughter had a episode, and she was in the hospital, and it was really a difficult time for me because my daughter was no longer the same kid who I knew her to be,
Right.
and there were things that were happening that we had never experienced before. I had never experienced as a parent. Not to mention that she was in the hospital, and then she was in the hospital waiting for a bed at one of the rehab centers. Now, remind you, this requires money, it requires insurance, it requires someone to be there. Being a
Yeah.
single parent had some support, but not the same support as just having all my family around.
Yeah.
And so I had already made a decision that I was gonna make this transition because I was really stuck in my career. And it's one of those things that you get to this place where, you say you're gonna jump off the mountain, like you're gonna parachute out the door or whatever
Yeah.
it is, and get in the water and swim, and there's sharks in there. And my buddy used to tell me, who rode motorcycles, he said, when you're riding a motorcycle, not that I ride, but he said, there is a point when you're going so fast, you have to make a decision. You're either going to slow down or you are going to move past that fear barrier to get to the place that you want to be in. And
Right.
that was this moment in time where I had to make a decision whether I was going to acquiesce to the situation and go back to the job. And, for me, a dead end job had good benefits, but dead end job wouldn't allow me to really expand in my career. I literally felt sick every day when I was going to work. I literally, I despised the activities that I had to do because it just was not fulfilling me, wouldn't
Yeah.
allow me to grow.
Yeah.
And so
So
all those things
so
were happening.
Yeah. So, but before we walk through, I know that a lot of us, if we think about movies or story, and CJ's building this up to this point where he's got this big decision to make. Um, we always look for the happy ending. We always look for the strong in the story here, right? But I want you to take us through making the decision and what that meant for you and your family. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a moment. We're gonna go through a sponsor moment here, but I want you to talk us through the moment where you had to actually make that final decision about what you were going to do, what it meant for your career, and what it meant for your family. Let's take a quick break.
Are you a content creator, speaker, or thought leader? Do you pull your hair out every time you try to edit a video? Or get really disappointed when your videos don't get the views you're hoping for? It's okay to admit that you need help. If you're ready to stop wasting time and start spreading your message, it's nice to meet you. I'm Kayla O'Brien of Kayla O'Brien Media. I help creators in a variety of businesses get a foolproof game plan for their video content. Does that sound like something you want? No matter where you're starting from today, you need to know what your goals are, how to get the highest production value, and how to edit your content to fit correctly on each platform. No matter what your budget, there are options that can help you get started today. If you're ready to take your content creation experience from this to this, visit KaylaO'BrienMedia.com and let's connect.
All right. Every business needs some way to capture their content. They need somebody who can make sure that they are looking good, they're on the right path, and that person can be Kayla O'Brien. So go check out Kayla O'Brien Media at KaylaO'BrienMedia.com. Tell her RK3 sent you. Let's get back to the show. All right. So, CJ, so you've got this thing, you've got this choice that you've got to make. You got this choice that you've got to make. Do I walk into or stay in this place where my daughter is, or do I take this opportunity, this training opportunity, which can put food on my table, which can add money to my bank? Maybe. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Tell us about that moment. Tell us about the decision that you had to make and what you did.
So it was very challenging. I think it was one of the most challenging decisions I ever had to make in my entire life, and definitely it defined my career, defined who I was as a dad and who I was as a man, and who I was as a leader. And I think this is really what helped me understand about leadership decisions because it's not cut and dry, it's not clean, it's not makes sense. You can't do one of those decision matrix that, pros and cons. It was like one major pro and a whole bunch of cons.
Yeah.
and just feeling like I was Neo in the Matrix, and which pill would I take? And first running away from the opportunity, but just realizing my destiny was on the other side of that difficult decision. But I also thought about, what if it doesn't work out? What's going to happen for my daughter? What's going to happen? And this was the one decision I said to myself: if it doesn't work out, what's going to happen with my daughter? How am I going to get the funds? How am I going to, make it and live and maintain? But the other question, which was the more important question, it was hard to see at the time through the emotions. It was, what would happen if I don't even try?
Yeah.
What will happen if I don't even consider the opportunity on the other side? And it was excruciating because it was the only time in my life where my family kind of pushed back for the decision that I was making. So you got your kids there, you got your family members who are like, this doesn't seem like the best idea that you should, the best decision that going in this direction that you should make. And it was excruciating. And I really had to go to a place that I had to open up another door to who I was.
Right.
Because I had been living in fear. I had been living in lack. I had been living in less. I had been living in imposter syndrome. And the pain that I was feeling for staying where I was started to become greater than the pain of moving forward. And they say when that happens, that's when you break free of the old self. Right. And that's really what it was. It was me coming out of the shell of I could no longer stay in that space. Although there were I felt dangerous situation happening on the forefront of my household. And I had to rise to be the leader to move beyond that. And it took everything in my being and every piece of my faith. They say, have faith the size of a mustard seed. That's pretty much what I had. And that's really the torment. And then once I made that decision, it was clear. Yeah. It was like the the sea had parted, the clouds had parted, there was sun. Although I hadn't fully made the decision yet, I knew in my spirit, in my heart. So when I talked to my mom and I talked to my family members, they knew in my spirit, this guy, he knows something that we don't. And from that moment, I walked forward.
Yeah. So to be clear, the decision that you had to make was to stay at the hospital, not knowing
Yep.
what the next step was with your daughter, or
Not knowing she was going to get the bed to
right,
the rehabilitation center soon enough before I leave.
right,
And how would it be paid for if she
yeah,
got it or when she got it?
right. So you decided, listen, I've got to provide. So
Right.
you went on the road to make the money that it would take
I
to
walked
take care of
outside.
this.
More specifically, I walked
Yeah,
outside of the hospital. I was like, tears were coming down. I'm praying. I'm meditating. I'm like, okay, this is what it's all about. Is this should I be doing this? And I got the phone call and they said, we got one more spot. Are you taking the spot?
right.
And I said, yes. And
Yeah.
from there, it was clear that that was what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, and I wanted to be clear on that because I know that sometimes when it's involving our children,
Yeah.
we want to be by their side, holding their hands the entire way, and
Wiping the sweat
yeah,
from the brow, holding their
yeah,
hand, looking into
yeah,
their eyes. Yeah.
yeah, and but then there's the other decision as a dad, as a provider, as a protector, as as the banker, as the ATM,
The cook,
yeah,
the cleaner,
yeah,
the
yes,
dishwasher, washing the
yeah,
clothes, the homework person, the mediator,
yeah,
parent, teacher, coordinator.
yeah, yeah. But that also sets up the story of where you are right now. You make a critical decision at a critical time, and it sets up where you are right now, which is some of the essence of your book, your current book. What's
Mhm.
my zip code story? So tell us a little bit about the title and the significance of that. What do you mean by what's my zip code story?
So the zip code story is not just about, it's about where you grew up, like your zip code. I realized that by me growing up in, the zip code of Fort Washington, 20744, one number change in my zip code could have created a totally different CJ or Chris,
Right.
totally different experience, totally different friends, totally different experience with public education, um, social justice system, all those different things. So it is about where you grew up. But then in addition to that, it's about how you grew up. It's about the sights and sounds outside of your door. It's about the conversations around the dinner table. It's about if you even had dinner around the dinner table, or did you have dinner? It's about all of those things, those two components. They shape the way you see the world. They shape the way you see yourself. They shape the way you see your opportunities in life. The way those decision making moments and those opportunities, and what you do behind them. And that's really what the book is about. It's about that concept, and it's about I work in the diversity industry or field, and it really is about expanding the conversation around diversity, and not just focusing on race and gender, sexual orientation, but expanding it to this whole concept around class,
Wow.
and how these layers, these social layers, these connections that we have can really move us along the lattice of getting to where we want to go in our life. And at the end of the book, I talk to HR leaders and leaders in companies, and how they can also help expand their zip code story and the zip code stories of individual contributors through people, changing your connection with people, places, and things.
Wow. Wow. So how would you say, as you reflect your own zip code story, how did that really help you frame that decision, that crucial decision for you, and how does it frame crucial decisions that you have to make now?
So I've been into personal development for, I don't know, 20 something years. And it's almost like priming the pump, but for a very long time. For those who don't know, it's when you had a well underground, and you had to open and close the pump and,
Yeah.
and suck the water up until it came out. And it took a long time. So it's about putting those seeds in, listening to motivational, inspirational, fundamental, like personal development, spiritual development, health development, podcasts, books, videos, going to seminars, all these things that kind of led up to that. Because before that, my zip code story was much different. It was a person of lack. It was a person of meager desire to be something greater. There was this small little ember that was trying to burn out and be greater into a roaring fire. But because of the people I was associated with, because of the family I was born into, because of the experiences that I had in education, that amber kept being like flaming out. Yeah. And I was really just trying to figure out, like, how do I develop and grow? And it was through all of those chance encounters, talking to mentors, talking to people who gave me books, that really led to me changing my zip code story. And I would even say, literally changing my zip code story. I moved, and this was really crazy. I moved, and I talk about this in the book. I had a relationship, and I needed to move my daughters for school's sake. And it was only an hour away from where I grew up, and I did not want to move. I was terrified of making a 1 hour move in destination, because I had never lived outside of my zip code story. I had never spent a great deal of time outside of predominantly, African American, lower middle class experience, which wasn't horrible, wasn't bad, but it didn't give me opportunity to experience anything outside of that. And I mean, I'm going to tell you, it took everything. I didn't want to do it, but I won't go into that story. I was almost forced to make that shift. Yeah. And it meant changing that zip code, again, an hour away from where I originally grew up. I started meeting people who were different than me. I started experiencing people who had different backgrounds than me and who came from different locations. And that then led to the next thing, that led to the next thing. And even at the time when I started that journey, I had no stamps in my passport. I talk about that in the book. And I went from like having really no stamps in my passport, really not having that exposure and experience. I didn't at the time have a college degree, to, moving from that space to master's degree, teaching at a college, at an MBA, speaking abroad, writing books, TED Talk speaker, multiple stamps in my zip code, in my passport. I didn't swim. That's one of the things we talked about at the book signing. I didn't swim, and it made me want to start to swim and experience something different. And that's big for a person of color who didn't grow up in that way. So not only did I start swimming, I started swimming laps, and then I started snorkeling, then I started kayaking, then I started scuba diving, and I was last year I scuba dive off the coast of West Africa, Tanzania, Black Sea. Yeah, and so you see the difference, and we're talking about a 6-year difference in that experience and making that decision. So this is not like years and years ago. It's the pain is still fresh. And so when I tell people, my goal is to inspire that zip code story, for example, something as basic as swimming, making that decision to then expanding that whole experience of travel and connection. And literally just recently, I was asked to sit on a board of an organization because of my connection with the water.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's all those things.
Yeah, we can go so deep with this, because this whole zip code story is more than just a euphemism for your geographic space. It's really about your spiritual, emotional, mental space of comfort and discomfort, and how that helps you make decisions in your life. Man, we can go further, but we're running out of time here. So let's wrap with this. Tell us a little bit more about where we can get in touch with you, where we can grab the book, and just wrap us up with one final word of encouragement or advice for people.
Yeah, sure. I would say, one, you can find me at my website, cjgrosstalks.com. And obviously, you can also put that into LinkedIn. I'm available there as well. You can see some of the interesting posts that I do. And I would say, as a follow up, really, I encourage people. Yes, obviously, get the book, but how can you expand your zip code in terms of people? What new people can you meet? What mentors can you find and connect with? Who can you mentor? And then travel. Travel is critical for growing your you as an individual, and the possibilities of who you can be. And then lastly, activities. What activities that maybe because of resources or background and experiences that can you get involved with? For me, I started motocross, right? Well, I took that down a notch and just started riding on the trail, but I love it. And I would have never thought that would be my experience. I kayak, I skeet shoot, I ride horses, I scuba dive, I surf, I'm learning Spanish, right? And so I would encourage people to figure out how to do this, because what that does is it changes really your brain architecture to expand your creativity and expand who you are as a person. So then when you go to get the job, when you build that relationship, when you go to get that loan for your properties that you want to purchase, you then are coming to that situation as a full person, as a developed and a growing person, instead of being meager and not able to accomplish your goals in that way. So your zip code story really dictates how and if you will accomplish those goals.
Love it. Love it. CJ, it's good to have you here, man. What's My Story podcast? Head on over to cjgrosstalks.com to learn more about CJ, and hang out in the green room here for just a moment as we wrap this thing up, man. So what is your zip code story? I grew up in the Bronx, and I knew quite a few people who had never left the Bronx to go to Brooklyn or to Queens. Now, geographically, these boroughs of New York City were only 10 miles or less from each other, but there were people who'd spent their entire life, sometimes 3, 4, maybe 5 decades in one geographical location of the city. And you can only imagine what they missed out on by not going to some of the other boroughs. They may have missed out on going to the Statue of Liberty. They may have missed out on going to the Empire State Building. They may have missed out on going to Central Park, the Botanical Gardens, the Bronx Zoo, some of the amazing delicatessens or delicacies that were available in New York City by staying in their zip code. Let me ask you, are you missing out on something not only by staying in your geographical zip code, but are you missing out on any of the beauty and the potential of life by staying in your emotional and mental zip code? Are you willing to create a new story? Are you willing to explore? Are you willing to skeet shoot? Are you willing to travel so that you can change your zip code story? Go grab the book by CJ Gross and join me next time for the next episode of the What's My Story podcast. I'll see you. Peace.
What's my story?